Okay, so we're going to speak about our work at Plus D, where we see more than the straight line or the curve, that design is and can do more. So we work at the integration, we work on the pursuit of social function, aesthetic excellence, and technological and scales and different types of projects. And with our practice based in Rio de Janeiro and collaborations and projects throughout many cities, Cape Town, Cambridge, New York, and many other places, we're thinking about how the majority world, which is Africa, Latin America, and Asia, is going to be home to 93% of the urban growth through 2050. So as Latin America is now 75% urbanized, we're thinking about how this context can be a really important urban laboratory for other places in the next several decades. And as we're facing these challenges of urbanization, climate change, inequality throughout our cities, these are some images of the challenge we've faced recently in Brazil, from the Zika virus to droughts in Sao Paulo and other major cities throughout the past couple of years. And this image on the top right, which is from our community of Vidigal last week, of really intensive and out of the norm rainfalls. And we're working on how design can be applied to these challenges in our cities. We've been lucky to have the support of the GSD in this work and research. We completed the Appleton Fellowship, where we looked at projects and practices working on these challenges throughout Latin America, including some of the cities, Santiago and Medellin, that were in this series, thinking about how we can build a network and distributed intelligence to work together on these challenges. And in doing this, we think about the city as a system, one that's decided from the bottom up, where violence that's imposed on communities, favelas, in the lack of services and opportunities is often returned literally, and in patterns of violence, health crises, and other issues that are largely correlated as we look across the data about these kinds of issues. So we think about this as the frame of the divided city, which is something that occurs in different manners, but it is largely the pattern across many of our urban areas. So we're working on thinking about how to engage in transforming many of these challenging cycles. We've done this by building a matrix where we place people as the most important. And people, we know, live in space. And we've built a range of technologies and sciences to have knowledge where we through instruments have developed a new kind of space, which is the digital space. And so we use this design matrix in all of our projects to think about how to frame potentially new modes and scales of intervention that are often beyond architecture. And our process for doing this is built on three phases. The first is research, design, and development. And so we've inserted design into the technological innovation process of R&D to build this R&D squared process that feeds into learning that is continuous and continuously evolving. So we believe that it's important to be constantly measuring and developing metrics for understanding the impact of our work. We've done this at a range of scales, thinking from the top left about the continental systems of the flying rivers that come from the Amazon to feed our cities in southeastern Brazil, Rio, and Sao Paulo. And this system has come under great stress due to the global climate change patterns and deforestation that's occurring in the Amazon. To thinking all the way down to nanotechnology and, for example, carbon filters that can be used for water filtration with some of our partners at the National Laboratory for Nanotechnology in Brazil. So this idea, I think, of working across scales for the discussion today is extremely important. We've done this based from the favela Vidigal in Rio de Janeiro, which we call Rio Lab. We've set this up. Our studio is located near the top of the favela here that you can see, as an urban strategy for testing innovations that can be scaled across other areas of the city and the majority world. And Vidigal is very special because it presents many of the challenges of lack of public space, public services, violence, lack of education, healthcare, different challenges, but has a great deal of resonance both within the city and really globally, as Rio has been on the global stage for the past couple of years and coming with the Olympics this summer. So moving from the divided city, we're working on building projects that feed into creating a cycle for a progressive city, one where education, opportunities, and access to education, health, public safety, etc., create structures and means of engaging in democratic processes and governance to decide how we make our cities and engaging the right to the city. That feeds into more progressive and equal forms of urban development through connectivity, sustainability, resilience, and productivity. So we're going to talk about a few of those briefly this morning. The first is Future Now, which is an education project. It was really how our work together began through the transformation of Pedro's thesis into the School of the Year 2030 project, which was a studio taught at the GSD in 2012. And we've been working on thinking about how education is such a critical component of building our cities, really through James Heckman's research on impact in early childhood. And we're thinking, and through our research, on designing spaces that integrate the most cutting-edge evidence on these fronts through design of educational environments and their role in communities and throughout the city in engagement through democratic processes and really critical social spaces and communities.
Thanks, Carol. Buenos días a todos. Les voy a pedir disculpas porque voy a hablar en inglés. La razón es que estamos recordando todo para después publicar en la website de la Grad School of Design of Harvard and also the Landscape as Urbanism in the Americas. So here it goes, okay? So like Carol said, the key thing we were focusing is like what are the most systemic problems of our society and how can design be a tool to address them in an interdisciplinary or even multidisciplinary way. So how to estimate her increasing productivity, but democracy has not accompanied that. And the protests from Tahrir Square in Turkey, the Arab Spring, to the ones in Brazil have many differences but have one common point. Everybody is demanding more participation in the formal process of public decision making. So we propose to have this physical digital equipment called the Digital Agora. It would gradually substitute the legislative chamber of our cities in Brazil. We have a big problem in the design and development of the Divided City program, which it is that the decision about the space of the city is relegated to the hands of 30 or less people usually, which have the best incentives for corruption, which are discretion, nobody knows what they're doing, and power to decide. So it's not by chance that the construction companies lead the design of the cities instead of the representative leaders and the people. The scale of the architecture, we propose this equipment called the Digital Agora, which has three specific areas in the program. One for systematization, for people to learn how to understand how things work and to do research, especially in slums. Privacy is a huge matter, and what happens is that like noise and other matters forbid people to study and engage in intellectual endeavors. The second one is a makerspace. You know, one of the most interesting things we saw in Brazil in the protests was that the activists and the hackers were really fighting a lot. One side was saying digital mechanisms are the solution for democracy, and the other side was saying no, it's all about space. And the architects usually are jumping the side of the like traditional activists, but the real answer is that technology is to facilitate. What brings real change is occupation of public space. The other space that I was going to mention is the synthesis space. So our idea is to have these maker spaces in all communities around the city, and where hackers, engineers, artists, designers, and activists can gather together and produce, move from a consumption-based society to a production-based society that engage directly in the public decision-making of the city. The last space is the articulation space, which is the heart of the Agora, and the goal of this space is to serve as a space for cultural activities, for democratic participation, for debates, and for the public decision-making of the transformation of the space of the community. Campus. So our design is mostly minimalist, and we always think about the landscape, and the truth is the more we engage in research through the Acton Fellowship, the more we realize that landscape was really the key medium to integrate the built space with nature in an empowering way. But there was a question that was not answered by the practice as a universal body of knowledge. How do we address the fact that most communities in the world don't have the resources and the capabilities to design and build the equipments we are focusing our work on? So we decided that we want to move from this concept to focus on what people could do, what they had at hand, and we call this hybrid architecture. The key thing to develop that is the program, and I think it has been a bit forgotten in the architecture practice in the world. We have tended more to the artistic side, which is great, we're doing fantastic in that, but architecture is about arts and sciences. And now with these key challenges in the world, it's time to bring evidence to inform design. So we are blessed to meet these community leaders called Mauro Quintanilha and Paulo César de Almeida in the community of Vidigal. It was really special because I was in the water in the beach and I look at the favelas like, oh my God, it's a prime real estate, you know? If it was in Boston, it would be Beacon Hill. If it was in France, it would be Monaco, but it's in Rio, it's a favela, that's great. So we can possibly integrate it with less government interference using a coalition of the community, experts, designers, their scientists, engineers, others, and the private sector. And then when we prove the theory with like tangible change, we can scale up it as policy since it's a representative spatial sample that really represents the reality of Rio. It all began with the cleanup of a 16-ton trash dump by the community itself without any help from government, which by itself is a methodology derived from contextual intelligence that can be scaled up and is needed, because if you know slums, you know that the key problem in them, one of the key problems is the amount of trash dumps. Collection is really bad, and the culture of like how to distribute the dejects is not present yet. So this is the articulation space of the digital Agora. It's a structure that was built with a multifunctional purpose to hold the landslide risks from the hill, also to build public space and to serve as a bleacher that we are integrating with the new design we're doing. We have 150 days of hardcore building until the Olympics, but this was the beginning of it all. So the key thing that we want to address is like, how do we engage community and contextual knowledge not in a missionary way? How can we engage people as equals and act rationally to build processes, methodologies, and even design matrix like Carol was pointing, that are effective to change their realities? And how do you build public space to empower democracy? Because if you see after the protest, there has been a movement in the whole world of the closing of civic space. Tahrir Square, for example, you see in Bahrain, what's the first thing they do? They close the squares. So we have not only to preserve the public space we have, but we have to create new public space and we have to occupy them to guarantee the future of our democracy. And it's also a major part for architecture to play in the bigger picture and vision of society. Then, evolving and learning, we were invited by the community to design this stair and this square. And we were blessed also to have the partnership with Arup, which believed in us from the beginning. And then we designed this as a multifunctional structure, but assessing more and approaching more with formal techniques. And the idea is that it's 3-in-1. It's contention from landslides, like the tire Agora. It's a vertical public space, but also due to the problem of the flying river system that Carol showed, it's a system for the collection, treatment, and distribution of water to the community. Because as you can imagine, every time there is a water drought or energy crisis, the first place they cut the supply is in the favela. So, evolving our studies, we did the first 3D model of the Rio of Vidigal, our real lab, and then we did mathematical modeling, both of the ways of the water, of the rain, and the natural sources that come from the rocks, but also from the possible spots to develop these solar energy systems. Like I was saying, our idea is not to move off the grid for favelas. This is nonsensical. The idea we have to work out, how do we decentralize the systems, the grid, and then how these autonomous systems that are complementary to main grid can come into action when the main grid fails, and especially for the favelas. So that's the Park CTA and the Sky Path that Charles mentioned before. You can see the view from the park on the upper left corner and the view from the peak. And our goal is that this project is going to become the catalyst for the transformation of Vidigal in the first integrated, sustainable, and resilient favela Islam in the world. And be aware, it's the biggest challenge together with climate change in the world today. Today, 1 in each 7 people in the world live in slums. By 2050, it's going to be 1 in 3. Either we anticipate in the week now, or social uprising, violence, and many other problems are going to be much bigger. So, this is interesting because this project we just applied for a competition is the program we developed based on all the distributed knowledge aggregated in the CTA project with the community. And it shows that like the knowledge of people without formal training can really feed in an effective way the work we are doing in places like GSD, MIT, and so on. So, it's much talked about, right, today. Interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, anti-disciplinary, but why? Because the truth is, for the greatest problems of our society, no discipline alone can solve them. And design is the best medium to synthesize all these disciplines in the necessary way to tackle these biggest problems. And we can't also think of design without aggregating digital space. And one thing that's very important today with the new technology we have, we really have to move away from zoning to coding. Right now we're developing a project with the Stevens Institute of Technology in New York, especially with Alex Washburn, that was the chief urban designer of Mayo Bloomberg for the 12 years. And at the same time, we're developing this mapping technology with 1 centimeter precision to build 3D models of the built space of communities there, Hoboken, Manhattan, and there in Rio, Vidigal, the favela, but also of the underground sewage and water pipe system. Because the truth is, no city in the world knows what's going on underground. When the Hurricane Sandy came to New York, there was a $7 billion that happened because the city was unprepared. And with climate change, and 98% of climate change disasters happen in majority world, 99% of death related to natural phenomena happen also in majority world. It's really critical to start assessing, doing design research, mathematical modeling, and developing strategies that can anticipate alternative scenarios. So the question, landscape as urbanism. We have not our origins in landscape urbanism, even in urban design. We come from a really strong architectural background, but we realize that it's not just the building, you know. You can't focus on urban integration, think about the housing. And then Medellin came with great news. Look, it's not just the housing, it's the urban design, it's the grid, it's the sidewalk, it's everything. But the truth is that the work of Charles and Motion in Harvard are really pointing to the new direction that with the face of climate change, this threat in our face, we cannot just focus on these 2 scales anymore. If we do not redesign the landscape like it's done in the Netherlands or even in Singapore, the future of most of our communities and cities in the world is going to be at serious risk. But in the end, always the most important is to have in mind that no matter how state-of-the-art is your design, your technologies, the most important thing is to serve and practice for the advancement of the human condition. So thank you very much.